I hope you're ready for some ill logic. Last time we faced off with Michael and his Kanto Kinglers. Please go check that video out first if you've not done so already, as we went through the team breakdown, preview, and battle, in which, spoiler alert, the Buffalo Buffon emerged victorious with a 2-0 win off the back of Tangela of all things, bringing us up to 4-1. This time we've got Matt and his 1-4 Cleveland Castforms. Timestamps will be in the description for the team preview, battle, and post-game thoughts. Matt actually beat me in the previous season with a VGC team that is actually pretty nicely replicated here in this season's singles league, interestingly enough. Looking at it, we're going to be dealing with Scolipede, Raichu-Alola, Hydreigon, Togekiss, Stonejourner, Lapras G-Max, Porygon 2, Marowak-Alola, Mudsdale, Dusclops, and Ferrothorn. A couple of things stand out immediately to me. The first is the Trick Room potential, starting with Porygon 2 and Dusclops setting Trick Room for big attackers, mainly Marowak-Alola, and also possibly Ferrothorn and Mudsdale. Those also kind of point out the giant defensive stat that Matt has, which I believe is an average of over 100. Very thick team to get through for sure. The other thing that stands out to me is the abundance of special attackers with boosting potential and good speed. Hydreigon is definitely the scariest of those, running Nasty Plot or Scarf usually, but Togekiss can do very similar things, boost up and flinch me down potentially, and Raichu carries similar potential but with even more speed than those two. Scolpide's kind of the odd one out there, being a physical attacker instead, but that comes with the same boosts. Swords Dance and Speed Boost potential will just annihilate me. Not to mention, of course, the G-Max Lapras that sets up screens for all of these to set themselves up. So, how do all of these match up against my team? Let's start with Dusclops, who, despite the ability to stop Trick Room against me reliably, isn't as good as another Trick Room setter I'm going to reference later on. Otherwise, Dusclops clicks Toxic, and, well, that's actually about it, so no real worries, especially with my plethora of super effective attackers, including Dragapult and Sneasel, among several others. Raichu is next, as it just kind of gets dunked on by things like Dragapult and Sneasel as well, not to mention Magnezone and Mew's amazing matchup against it, and it's just outclassed overall by other team members. Stonejourner is super cool, don't get me wrong, I love this thing, but since my recent team acquisitions, my team has skewed more specially offensive over physically offensive, and Stonejourner just kind of falls flat as a result. No bulk on the special side to speak of at all. Marowak is super threatening, but literally only in Trick Room. Outside, so much my team outspeeds and OHKOs, so I'm not overly concerned, honestly. I think I'll finish up the leave behind section with Mudsdale, who, despite again being immune to electric type stab, that's a very important note for all these teams, just like the Marowak can be as well, by the way. Mudsdale still gets buffed by their secondary coverage very hard, and again, it falls prey to my specially leaning team as a naturally physically defensive mon. As for the 6 I think should come, let's start with Togekiss. I have lost 2 single-handedly before due to Air Slash. Scarf is threatening, Defog is pretty annoying, my speed tiers are just okay against it, considering Scarf can even outspeed Dragapult by a couple points. Porygon 2 is the aforementioned Trick Room setter who can back up its bulk with reliable recovery and very good bolt beam coverage, for which I really only have Magnezone, and it also requires me to carry Knockoff a little more readily, though that also deals with the Dusclops, so maybe just something to carry around anyways. Ferrothorn I think definitely comes, great typing for my team, and the ability to chip away everything with Hazards and Leech Seed. By itself it requires more team coverage from my team too, with no fighting type to speak of and only one mediocre fire type on my side. Scolipede's ridiculously good with Swords Dance, and probably just slap on 3 other moves for coverage, somewhere between the 2 stabs and Edgequake, 3 of those 4, not to mention just a single boost on it outspeeds my entire team. I cannot afford to let it get that Swords Dance up, but I need to have a backup option or 2 as well, just in case it gets there. Hydreigon is so scary. Nasty Plot set or Scarf set will slap. Dragon Dark and ground coverage is brutal, so we'll see what I can find to deal with that. Finally, that G-Max Lapras. Whoo boy, free screens, Water Ice Electric coverage can absolutely destroy me, and the Water and Electric coverage can set themselves up with Rain and Terrain to become an offensive powerhouse. So how do I try and deal with it? Unfortunately, it's not going to be with last week's hero Tangela, who gets absolutely murked by the special attackers, and offensive attackers like Scolipede and Ferrothorn still just destroy it 1v1. Magnezone's next, who struggles to 1v1 the Steel-type Ferrothorn, and otherwise just underspeeds threats, and struggles to throw out one of its stabs when you have things like Ferrothorn or Marowak or Porygon 2 that can just tank them up easy. Vikavolt is the other electric type to stay behind despite the nice matchup with some of the slower members. It doesn't take hits from the fast members before it can hit them hard, and the bulky ones it really struggles to break through. Not enough of either side. And on a similar note to Silvally, who's also staying behind rather, I need to give it a break after failing to use it all that well recently. Savali deserves that break. I'm struggling to find the right typing and set for this week overall. And the other 6, I think they deserve their spots well enough anyways. Finally, the G-Max Anaconda has decent use, but I'm worried about it getting caught out against bad matchups, or still being unable to break through, or getting caught behind screens, or still going down to boosted enemies, or you get the idea. The name of the game is as follows. Make it through the rough early game, meaning getting through the early trick room, while chipping on the setters, getting through the G-Max, getting through the screens, and then follow it up with a killer end game. That being said, how do I plan to do that? I think the season debut for our Volby here is a pretty easy way to see what I am trying to accomplish. It exemplifies everything. Toxic is a big part of the strategy here, because if my opponent is trying to start with Trick Room, I can pressure out Porygon with Toxic, or else it switches into something that doesn't take advantage of the Trick Room. Ferrothorn sure cannot, as despite its immunity to Toxic, it won't be setting up hazards thanks to Defog and Roost, and keeping me healthy, and Knockoff is really the only thing that threatens me. The foul play is actually pretty cool too, as the other poison immunity Scolipede will get O-code at +2, or at neutral after Rocks and Life Orb. That's the goal of the team, pack coverage for specific threats and otherwise stick to that stalling game plan before getting to our biggest sweeper/breakers. The speed, by the way, is for Lapras so that I can get a Toxic off if necessary, and otherwise Roost in front of it to tank a little bit better against the super effective attacks. So though obviously this is the physically defensive piece with the Dark Stab coverage for Scolipede and Marowak. That being said, the specially defensive piece, as always, is Mantine, and it absolutely needs max special defense to tank hits from Kiss and Hydreigon, which can let me Toxic and Roost on them too. Haze is the special move here for the nasty plotters, though I have to be careful with Hydreigon, who can Draco me first or just 2-KO me, so mainly for Togekiss. Scald is good enough coverage, and it lets me fish for burn against things like Ferrothorn and Scolipede, who are immune to Toxic, while doing good chip to Marowak or Mudsdale. Straightforward as always, so why don't we finish off our Roost trio with Mew here, who has a very weird set. A glance at the EVs and the move Dazzling Gleam will tell you that this is a Hydreigon check despite being a Psychic type for the Dark type, and that is definitely true despite having that Dark weakness. I have a lot of checks. This is one of the more straightforward ones. Dazzling Gleam Okos most of the time after Rocks. Otherwise, this Mew is really just here to mess with the early stall a little bit and wearing out the screens. Taunt is enough proof of being able to deal with things like Porygon or Ferrothorn too, especially paired with my recovery. And Fire Blast is cool coverage as it 2-KOs the Ferrothorn. Again, I'm not very confident in my Ferrothorn coverage right now, so slapping on a couple of 4-time super effective moves against 2 of the biggest threats I'm facing just makes a lot of sense to me. If all Mew does is wear something down or stall out screens, that's honestly all that I'm asking for from it this week. Finally, it's got that little bit of the special defense there. It's solely for Porygon 2's download. That one extra point is a small optimization that's kind of cool to keep in mind here. Now, I keep mentioning that Rocks chip, and that should hopefully come from my dedicated lead in Colossal, who is making its team debut with a very standard set, admittedly. That's fine though, Rocks are very important in the matchup, not just for the calcs I mentioned, but super effective chip on things like Lapras or Scolipede. Rapid Spin is a definitely safer way than Volby to remove the hazards, though that defog is still necessary just in case, and the stab moves deal with things like Scolipede, Togekiss, Ferrothorn, Marowak, and others very effectively. And the Choco Berry, if I'm still healthy, it lets me take coverage moves from Hydreigon's Earth Power, Scolipede's Earthquake, Mudsdale's Earthquake, Marowak's Earthquake. Lots of ground coverage can come. So when a pinch, Colossal can put in that work too, just in case. You've seen lots of Hydreigon checks so far, right? Say hello to another classic check. We've got a Choice Band Sneasel with, of course, Ice Shard as a coverage move. The other moves are standard, and there isn't much to say with it, except that I am cheating a little bit with the speed, which lets me go Adamant, though I no longer outspeed either Scolipede or Raichu. The former boosted speed anyways, and the latter, I'm kind of counting on not coming, honestly. Knockoff can destroy it if it switches in, or if I can just survive a hit. Adamant Band Sneasel destroys lives in this matchup, though. I'm very excited to see what all this can do. Of course, the last one is going to be a Dragapult, and this time, the one to take advantage of the enemy team with a sweet substitute is this Dragon Dance set. Yeah, the set struggles with things like Togekiss and Ferrothorn, but yes, it can set up on many mons. Ferro without Knockoff, Dusclops, Porygon lacking Ice Beam. It may not seem like much, but I think that's kind of the purpose of the other mons, which is to take out the threats and bait things in. Dragapult can clean up late game if it gets the chance, and while it may not seem the best, let's see if it can do what I'm asking from it in the match itself. Okay, Dusclops over Porygon 2, and that's very good for me, of course, and a Marowak over Scolipede, which shows a harder Trick Room mode than expected. Also nice, with nothing faster than a Hydreigon, minus a Scarf, which means that things like Mew, Sneasel, and Dragapult should put in a little bit of work. Maybe more importantly, Volibee, which was here to cover Scolipede, still covers Marowak, and we also get to deal with Dusclops similarly to Porygon, so this should still be pretty straightforward. Anyways, I want to get rocks up ASAP, so I'd like to start off with the Colossal, of course, especially considering he made lead Pharaoh, so here we go. Dusclops is the start. That's absolutely fine. We aren't doing much to each other right now, so I'm looking for our rocks. Even better, rocks are going to come out on turn 1, and Kiss is the only removal he has, and Taunt comes out too late. That's outstanding. So, again, Volibee isn't doing much here. Foul Play was for the Scolipede first and foremost, and here Marowak does even more damage against me, so I don't really mind at all coming in on here on the Toxic. I think that's fine. That's one of the best ways to wear me down, sure, which isn't the best, but that's fine. Especially, though, because I get a Toxic off on the Dusclops, which could be more important onto it than for Volibee, because my recovery is much more reliable, and depending on that last move, if it's actually going to do damage or something, he doesn't really have any way to recover HP for himself, which is fantastic. So this is only a small issue, this Trick Room going up. I think I'm going to swap the Volibee out, mostly to reset the Toxic damage on it, and I think Colossal is probably the safest switch in right now. Because we are in Trick Room, if he does swap out to something else, I can outspeed almost anything, except for, of course, just the Dusclops and the Ferrothorn, but the Ferrothorn really doesn't want to stay in against me, so I think that makes a lot of sense. Probably the next least useful member right now. I'm going to tank the Seismic Toss super easily, and I decided to try to go back into the Volibee to take a possible incoming Toxic, but he makes the switch into Lapras, which is actually kind of outstanding to see that damage on the rocks switching in, so that's pretty cool. So this is kind of an interesting turn. He can G-Max me and hit me real bad, but I also have an opportunity to spread Toxic, so is it going to be worth the risk, or do I try and roost out? This is a point where it would have been, I have the EVs to outspeed Lapras, but in Trick Room that's not very good. I decide it's probably worth it to stay in on this thing, because that Toxic is super important. He does stay in as well, and it's going to be Max Rockfall. Okay, that's fine. Without Stab, that isn't KOing me, and I don't miss the Toxic back, which is really nice. Overcoat actually coming into play here too, as I don't take the Sandstorm chip, which is kind of cool. To avoid that damage, we'll see that maybe potentially later. And the Toxic damage start to rack up on both of us a little bit. So Volibee could definitely be sacked at that point, and that's totally fine. This is one of the two biggest threats I wanted to wait out or do something about. But I see another opportunity to save it for a sack against something bigger potentially. So Mew is a decent switch, I think. As with Recovery and Trick Room down, I can outspeed it and get back up with full with relative ease. Lefties negate the Sandstorm chip too, but of course the Max Geyser, while it does hurt, and will continue to hurt because the rain sets it up for later, I have the ability to roost up and no longer take the Sandstorm chip either. So that is totally fine. I can get back up to full. And on the last turn of G-Max, Resonance does make a lot of sense as it sets up the screens for a good amount of time. And there's the second aspect of Lapras that I need to outlast right now. So G-Max down, outstanding. Screens are up next to stall out. I can restall it out right now, though, which is fantastic, except for the last move on Lapras, which is going to be that Toxic. Synchronize isn't going to work, but that's going to be fine because we see the Toxic really start to ramp up there. 24% just from that. I've barely done anything to it. It's just been the rocks and the Toxic, so that's kind of cool. Those turns definitely misplay. I'm going to be honest, I shouldn't have clicked Roost. There really wasn't anything to recover off here. Should have just clicked basically anything else, honestly, because 6% isn't going to matter. And if Lapras were to stay in, then being able to just have it go down that turn, potentially, would have been pretty nice. I was predicting something like Pharaoh to come in, maybe, and maybe I should just clicked Fire Blast. Even with screens and rain, I could have done something. Would have been better than just roosting up that little bit, I think. But that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Hydreigon comes in. I have an answer to it right in front of it. So I know Toxic's starting to ramp up just a little bit, but I think that's fine. Hydreigon is such an issue. If I stay in, I can stall out two of the biggest remaining problems, probably the two biggest remaining problems. Those are screens and Hydreigon. I have these Hydreigon checks because it's a problem. Let's just see what it's running, though. Seeing the leftovers should probably give it away. Through screens, Dazzling Gleam's only going to do 40. That's fine, honestly. Nasty Plot comes off, that's honestly fine, too. I just want to find a way through this thing behind screens, and if it takes sacking my Mew, I think that's going to be fine. So let's just get a little bit more chip. Suddenly, Dazzling Gleam doing 46%, which shows the lowest and highest roll, strangely enough, and I just go down to Dark Pulse. That's totally fine. This guy's down to 20% now. The biggest threat, probably. Screens are done. G-Max is done. Perfect. This is the position I was trying to get to all along. And I want to emphasize this because I feel like others are going to give me some crap for tossing Mew here. But let's just assess the game state right now. I've lost Mew, and my Volby is almost gone. Granted. True. Otherwise, Cole at 77%. Everybody else totally full. On the other side, Hydreigon, the biggest threat on the team, is at 20%. Lapras, arguably the other biggest threat. G-Max down, Screens down at 30%. It's going to go down to 5% when it comes in on Rocks next. And it's Toxic. Dusclops, Toxic. This is, if it's not even, it's in my favor, I think. I think the team advantage is probably mine again. I listed off how many of my threats outspeed him, and the Screens are coming to a close here at the end of this turn. So I think that's pretty good. At this moment, go ahead and look at my Sneasel, which I'm actually going to just send in now here too. This thing is so good at this point. Dragapult with Phantom Force, maybe underrated thing. I haven't allowed any hazards on my side of the field either. Ferrothorn is over there, and he doesn't have hazards up on my side. I'm able to swap around pretty well right now. Speaking of, though, Sneasel, not really allowing him to swap around because I can just click knockoff and nothing's really going to come in. Maybe the Pharaoh or the Togekiss are about the only things that can do that, I guess. That's fine. Knockoff just going to do that. Shout out to Mew for stalling out the Screens to allow this neutral play to happen. And now the biggest misplay from his end is going to happen here as Marowak-Alola is the next pick to come out. I mean, I really have no reason to do anything other than just click knockoff, so I'm just going to do that and pick up another KO. Look at young Sneasel going in. That's what's up. Pharaoh's next, though, so playtime is over. Colossal is a very nice switch on potential hazards. Also resists grass moves, but he's going to double out into the Dusclops, interestingly enough, which may be a little bit late, considering the Marowak is already down. He may be trying to force Trick Room, rather, which it does make a lot of sense, even with the Marowak down. I don't want to risk Sneasel again right now. Dragapult, definitely no. Mantine doesn't like it, so I'm just going to go for this. We're going to roll the dice with Rock Blast. It's going to hit 3 times. Okay, not terrible. 7% each time getting Toxic. That's fine. That's actually a good thing, too. We're trying to prevent Trick Room right now. Flare Blitz isn't killing from this range, and Trick Room is definitely next. At this percent, I think only a 5-hit Rock Blast is going to stop that Trick Room from coming out. Let's see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No way. What? Colossal coming in the clutch. Even if that is currently my best one within Trick Room, I'd have to swap it out until Pharaoh came back in because that's my best answer to it. That was super clutch. That was super clutch. Wow, wow, wow. Lapras makes a ton of sense to coming in to revenge KO me, but it's just going to go down after a hit too because we can see here it's going to take rocks damage. I figure this is probably the time to go sack that Volby. It misses. Literally doesn't matter. We just go down. This is looking pretty nice though. Very cool, honestly, because we've got Volby picking up that KO, Colossal got one too, and Sneasel grabbing 2 KOs. So we're spreading the wealth a little bit for the lower tier picks. Kind of something I wanted to do, honestly, in this matchup. So now 4-2, I figured Togekiss is the bigger threat, so Sneasel is the easy answer to that. I can just click an Ice move. Even Ferrothorn coming in would be hurt super bad. But Pharaoh is the first switch, and not fearing much of anything with Polt, I decide it's probably time to unleash the Beast. Even better, Body Press coming out, which is otherwise great coverage against me. Even better, on the sub is a Leech Seed, and that's not going to hack it. Setup time. So, 1 DD, and he's going to put up spikes. Oh no. Oh no, 2 DDs. Oh no. With spikes again. Oh no. 3 DDs. Energy Ball, that is not a good enough move. We're going to go for a 4th DD, and the sub is still not broken. Those extra EVs are coming into play right now for the sub. It's just a simple matter at this point. Going to +6, click a couple of moves, and just kind of win the game at this point. Have 2 very good coverage moves for this, of course, as we're going to click Dragon Dance just one more time here at the end of the game. Just to make sure if it's going to be given to me, I may as well do it, right? Dragon Darts is going to be enough to 2 a KO. I totally forget if Phantom Force is a contact move or not, so kind of decided Dragon Darts was a little bit safer in that aspect, which is fine. And second Dragon Darts will KO it, even when resisted, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, Togekiss is immune to D-Darts, but that's fine, seeing that it has Boots, because Phantom Force is going to just finish off the match just a couple turns later without needing to switch in on the spikes that were set up. GG to Matt, a nice 4-0 win with some underused sets, some interesting cool mons. Let's go over the game a little bit in more detail. So Lapras on his side, obviously a huge threat, but it could have been much, much worse if it had just clicked an ice move on Volibee and KO'd it. I'm not sure if it would have KO'd, maybe with stab it would have. As it was, I survived with enough HP to get the Toxic off. Could have ended up being a big misplay for me if it did KO me, but I got pretty lucky there and was just able to wear the Lapras down. Hydro Pump in the rain would have hurt real bad too, but I was prepared to take those with Mew if needed, so that's totally fine. Getting rocks out for this thing was tremendously important too, and just wearing down things through the screens was outstanding. Just getting past that was super important for the team. Togekiss had boots, but didn't end up coming until it was far too late. This is why I didn't need to use things like Mantine, I guess, but I guess if it was a defensive Kiss, it didn't really do much for him anyways with the team I brought. Unless it had Heal Bell, maybe Defog, I'm not really sure what it had. It didn't end up coming in, so... Dusclops, again, not as good as Porygon 2 overall, and especially in the matchup where Teambuilder Ice Beam could have put in a ton of work against me. It did enough, I suppose, got the Toxic KO on Volibee, and I got pretty lucky in preventing the second Trick Room. Ferrothorn really should not be running Energy Ball. Power Up is always the grass move of choice, and Knockoff Gyro Ball were just better against my team overall. Not much else to say there, honestly. Marowak shouldn't have come in when it did either. This would have been a nightmare into Trick Room. Looking at my team, it Elko's almost my whole team with the right move, so I got pretty lucky, considering I let my Volibee get too low to deal with it otherwise. Finally, Hydreigon is always a threat with a Nasty Plot. I'm just glad that I got it low with Mew, even behind screens. On my side, of course, Dragapult's a threat. It would seem that I got a great chance to set up, and I got the 2 correct coverage moves on it. Dragapult is now actually the kill leader in the league too, as well as KD leader at 9 and 3 +6, followed by my +5 Magnezone too, which is pretty neat. Mew had a support role here again. That's totally fine by me. Correct coverage moves. Once again, I could have taunted, I guess, but it was more important to be able to tank the Hydro Pumps in the rain. The only misplay I made really was clicking Roost at 94%. Mantine didn't appear, but that's fine. Once Hydreigon switched into Mew, I could bring it low. This Mantine was really only going to be here for Togekiss at the end, and that let Colossal be the Pharaoh check. But it never got to that point, and that's fine. Cool fact too, Mantine, the one time it didn't come was the one match that I lost, and every time I've won it has come, so, you know, maybe we'll have to keep it around anyways, as a nice little mascot at the very least. Sneasel was another great answer for Boots Togekiss, as without Scarf I outsped it and destroyed it with the band. Speaking of Sneasel picking up more KOs and moving into the league leaderboard at 5 and 1 after just 2 appearances. A great set this time. Knockoff was amazing this week, especially with Stab, Adamant, and Band all backing it up. Colossal ended up being pretty cool. Rock Blast really came in clutch there in the Dusclops, and the rocks were very impactful throughout, especially on the Lapras and chipping the Clops for itself later on. Finally, Volibee tanked the Max Rockfall, got 2 crucial Toxics off, and bought turns against the G-Max. I really can't ask for much more from a Tier 5, especially one who I just picked up a couple weeks ago as a replacement Dark-type. Tough to pick an MVP. I think Colossal will narrowly edge it out for the Rocks pressure and the 5-hit Rock Splash, which was, again, super clutch. That'll bring us up to 5 and 1. This next week brings us to the final stretch of the season, which is actually pretty tough. Season 5 VGC champ Zach and his 4-2 Summit County Psyducks await. See ya.